Twitter that there was going to be some like question and answer type of video forum today. And I'm not sure how that went. I wasn't able to log on, but I imagine a lot of people have lots of questions going on with the LSAT Flex and how that's even going to happen. And it's crazy.
Yeah. So they did have a lot of questions, and unfortunately, LSAC did not provide a lot of answers. They had this webinar scheduled for a while, and they had some admissions panelists on from different law schools, and they didn't really adjust the agenda to account for last night's announcement about the new online LSAT, also known as LSAT Flex. And so they will be doing another webinar next week where hopefully they address some of those questions, but I can definitely give a rundown of what I know at this point in time related to that new LSAT.
Absolutely. I think that'll be pretty good just to give people a general concept idea of what's going on right now. I think things are changing so quickly because of the whole pandemic. So if you want to just explain how the LSAT Flex is going to work, how that's going to affect those who registered for March and April, that'll be really helpful.
Yeah, of course. So basically what happened is that the April LSAT, also last night they announced that was canceled. It couldn't possibly go forward because most of the US now has stay-at-home orders. So there's no way to administer an in-person LSAT at a testing center if people aren't supposed to leave their houses. So they canceled the April LSAT. They added a new LSAT in late May, mid to late May. They haven't given a specific date yet, but that will be the alternative for those who had initially wanted to take the March or April LSAT. This new LSAT called LSAT Flex will be administered online. You will take it at home on your computer. It will also be different in that not only will it be at home as opposed to in a center with other students and proctors, it will be 3 sections, not 5. So it's shorter now, but through their detailed statistical analysis, they will equate the scores. So even if you do the at-home 3-section exam, you will still get a score out of 180 that is said to be equivalent or comparable to the traditional 5-section at-home exam. So you're going to do 1 section of games, 1 reasoning, and 1 reading comp. That's it. They're all back to back, then you're done.
How do you feel like that's going to change the dynamic of difficultiness of the exam compared to those that have previously taken it in person? Do you think it'll be easier or relatively the same? Do you think that maybe they'll make the questions a little bit harder to make up for the fact that it's a lot shorter?
Those are all great questions. And I think there are a lot of moving factors such that you can't really say for sure whether at home is better or a testing center is better. If you have fantastic internet at home and you live alone or you have nobody who's going to bother you, that could be a really smooth experience. Alternatively, if you have significant others or roommates or kids or noisy pets, then maybe being at home wouldn't be so great. If your internet's kind of shaky and not super fast, if your computer's old and you have some glitches, it might not be that great. I think overall, for at least most of the students I encounter, at home is preferable and shorter is preferable. It's a smoother experience if you're not going to have the proctors circling around or you're in a room full of other test takers who are making noise or being distracting in some other way. And you don't have to worry about where's the test center? How do I get there? Do I leave early? Do I have to travel for it? All of that's removed.
Yeah, I think that's something that is often really stressful as well when you're actually taking the in-person one, is having to figure out, especially if you have to travel pretty far, whether it's an hour, 2 hours away to the test center, that's a stress that you will no longer have to worry about. I mean, I did read on the LSAC's website that for those that don't have a computer accessible to them, they are going to work with those people to ensure that they can figure out some kind of solution, whether it's to borrow a computer or figure out where they can access internet access or whatever it may be. So I'm glad in that sense that LSAC is taking into consideration that although for a majority of people, this will be a benefit to be able to do it from home, there are still those people that don't have the access to those resources. And I'm glad they're, at least for the moment, putting it out there on their website to hold them accountable that they are going to be doing something about it.
Exactly. They are trying to be very student friendly. The new administration at LSAC with Dean Kelly Testy, she really is committed to equal access. And so if someone does have a barrier of some kind where doing it at home with good internet, with a good device. If that's not workable, then definitely reach out to LSAC and they will work out some way to make it work for you. As for your general question, though, of given that it's shorter, given that it may be a more comfortable environment, is it easier? What will they change to account for that? LSAC, they are masters of data. That's part of why it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get your score back, because they are so committed to making sure that students performed on the exam as expected. So they will adjust the difficulty. The exam is not curved only against those you take it with that day. They equate the scores on a 3-year rolling basis. So you're compared against everyone who took it a year and a half before, a year and a half after, at any point in time. So they're accounting for all of that. One big open question, though, is the previous LSAT with 5 sections, one being experimental. You've got 2 logical reasonings scored. Now you only have 1 logical reasoning scored. So at the moment, as of April 8th, 2020, we don't know whether it's going to be scored where they're going to double the LR performance to weight it differently to account for that, or whether all 3 sections will be equal. So previously, LR was half your score. Now it might only be a third. Maybe that means you want to focus less on logical reasoning and relatively more on games and reading comp. We just don't know right now on that one. And that's what I was hoping they would answer in their webinar this afternoon, which they did not. Hoping they'll give an answer on that next week, though.
Hopefully, especially because the test is in mid to end of May. For those who have been studying until now, I mean, they might have to switch whatever study methods they've been doing or start focusing on one area more than the other. I know I've heard from people that logical reasoning, they focus on it, but they know that they have that safety net that one of them is not, for the experimental, that one of them is not going to be graded. So I wonder how that's going to affect those that have already been studying. It would have been really nice for them to answer it as quick as possible, especially since although they made that announcement yesterday, they had to have had a lot of conversation about how that was going to affect those that are taking the exam. I feel like that's a common sense, no-brainer question that could have been thought about when considering what they were going to do with the LSAT Flex when announcing it as well.
Yeah, that's another factor. Yeah, I mean, the experimental. I mean, when you're doing 5 sections at a testing center, you're essentially wasting 35 minutes of brain power on something that doesn't count, and you don't know when it is. If it's section 5, obviously, if your brain is fried, no big deal, because then it wasn't scored anyway. But if it was earlier and you're wasting your personal time on a section that won't affect your score, and then you're more fatigued for a later section, that obviously has an impact. And so I think LSAC's people are going to be very busy in the 2 to 3 weeks after the online LSAT Flex, figuring out all of that, adjusting the raw score conversions as necessary, because this is a first time thing for them. There may also be relatively more tech glitches in this first administration. So something to be aware of. If someone is not in a hurry, I would say maybe don't do LSAT Flex in May, maybe do it in June, should the June LSAT be canceled, which I think it will be.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. Just because with anything, when something launches first, there's always a couple glitches, no matter how hard they try. So I definitely think if the opportunity and the time allows, to probably wait and let those who have to take it around that time in May. So whatever glitches that we're going to have for that get resolved, or come to some kind of solution how to better address those issues. So if it does happen to be that this quarantine extends to June or July, however long it may need to be, we have those issues addressed as far as technical issues. However, the good thing is that at least the test is going to pause. I was reading on the LSAC's website that, if there is some kind of technical glitch, the test will stop the time until that issue will get resolved. At least in that sense, it's not going to eat your time away from taking the actual exam.
Exactly. And one nice thing they've done is they've partnered with a company called ProctorU that does online test security. So I get a lot of questions from students. How are they going to make sure nobody cheats? So this company, ProctorU, is also used by ETS, the people who do the SAT, the GRE, and they basically monitor students with a webcam and a microphone for security purposes. And this company has been used for quite a while now. And so they know what they're doing. They're the leader in the field from what I'm reading. And Obviously, things won't always be perfect. There might be glitches. Could someone theoretically cheat? I suppose it's possible, but I wouldn't count on there being a ton of students doing that. I know people are
Right.
frustrated with all the changes, and they like to throw stones at LSAC, and they're an easy target because they're not perfect and they're a big institution controlling a lot of things. But at the same time, they are doing the best they can. And I think that this will largely go a lot more smoothly than the digital LSAT rollout last year when there were all the tablet malfunctions.
Yeah. And in addition, I think it's important to also remember that this is something that everyone is experiencing for the first time, whether it's taking the LSAT or, even companies that were trying to transition working online. All of this is something new for everyone. So I think we kind of have to roll with the punches and see what's going to happen. Definitely take precautions. And like we mentioned in the last video, prepare no matter what. This is the time, especially for those that are already registered. If there's an opportunity to change it, if there really is that question that, the glitches, how that's going to affect the score, I think taking the opportunity to change the test date if possible, and just keep preparing as much as possible, since we have that time. And at least we know now that the LSAT is going to continue no matter what, whether it's in person or online. We still have to be preparing for those exams.
Exactly. And speaking to that for a moment, I've been getting emails from students asking, should I do 3-section exams or 5-section exams for test day if I'm doing LSAT Flex? And I would say practice like it's game day. If your LSAT Flex is in May, it's 3 sections, do all your timed exams as 3-section exams. Then if you're retaking in, let's say, November, and if November is back to in-person 5-section exams, then do 5-section exams. Ultimately, the content of the exam is not changing. It's just the length of test day and the number of sections you're doing is different. So endurance will be a little bit less important for a 3-section online exam, and you will then have to place more importance on every single question you do. So you might want to adjust your pacing a little bit to make sure you really have super high accuracy, and maybe you work at a faster pace for yourself because you don't have to save up that energy for sections 4 and 5, since you're not going to be doing sections 4 and 5 that particular day.
Exactly. Especially since there's not going to be any repetition of any kind of section. So, once you're done with that section, you're done. You can move on and shift your thought mode into whatever next section you have to take for that exam.
Exactly. So Daisy, what other questions do you think we should address regarding this?
I think it probably will be nice to address how this exam, in terms of when your scores are going to get back, it's not going to take as long or any shorter than it would if you were to take the exam in person, compared to when we did the digital scores, the digital exam last year. It took about 2 to 3 weeks to get your scores. That, in fact, I am assuming is not going to change, right?
Correct. Yeah, I believe LSAC's site said 2 weeks for the online LSAT Flex, which is a little bit shorter on average than the digital in person. And I think part of that is simply that they can't get it back faster than that because of all the statistics they have to analyze. But they're also working quickly because law schools want those LSAT scores so they can evaluate applications. And law schools, by the way, are extending deadlines. They were waiting to know for certain the April LSAT would be canceled, which it has been. And so now at law schools, more and more, it is school by school, but they are extending deadlines in part to wait for the results of this new May online LSAT Flex. And they may extend further beyond that as well. If they need more applicants and the June LSAT's canceled and the June LSAT becomes another LSAT Flex, which I think is quite likely, then they will extend deadlines to wait for the results of that exam as well.
Absolutely. And I know as far as some schools that email me still, their deadlines have extended to June. So I'm assuming if some of them are doing, most other schools are going to follow as well, considering everything that's going on. And I honestly don't really see this getting any better anytime soon. And probably just even for safety precautions, they might even extend it to June just to ensure that there's not too many people in one room freshly right after they've allowed people to congregate again, if that were to be a possibility.
Correct. And I know a number of states, California and Virginia, both extended stay at home until June 10th. June LSAT is June 8th. I don't see how the June LSAT could possibly go forward, and I'm sure many other states will extend to June 10th or beyond if they haven't already. And so I think there's going to be at least one more LSAT Flex opportunity. And if there are second waves and third waves of COVID, as I've been reading, then LSAT Flex will be around for a long time. And I think the more administrations of LSAT Flex that go on, the more that becomes the new normal. And I hypothesize that even when COVID is largely a thing of the past, LSAT Flex may be here to stay as it becomes the new normal. I think it's very hard to go back on technology once you've advanced. And there are a number of difficulties with administering the LSAT in person. They have to book the testing centers. They have to hire the proctors. They have the issues of getting all the tablets in place, making sure all the tablets are fully charged. And students have to travel quite long distances to take these exams. And if they could offer the LSAT more frequently online, pulling out some of their old undisclosed test forms, I think that has a number of advantages. And I don't see them going back on that.
I think so too. I think that's a great point that you mentioned. And I wonder, as far as pricing in the future, just, I guess, kind of to ponder that thought, how that's going to change. You know, maybe if we have the option to pick whether you want the in-person digital, because I mean, they're not going back to paper at all, but, you know, whether they have the option to pick the in-person digital or taking it online, is it still going to be the same 190? As of right now, it's still going to be the same, but I wonder in the future if pricing will change in that regard, or they'll keep it the same as well.
So the pricing is actually $200. It's already risen since you did it, I guess. Yeah.
Really?
$200 to take. Yeah.
Oh my God. I thought it was 190.
Yeah, it was maybe a year or two ago, but now it's 200. I mean, but the pricing is equivalent for the online LSAT Flex as well as the digital LSAT in person. So the pricing is equal. I think it will remain equal for in the long term as well as the short term, in part because it might seem unfair for those who don't have the option to do one of them to be paying more or less than somebody else. I also think LSAC might save some money by doing it online, but they also have to pay this ProctorU company. They may have more tech support requests from students that require more labor to address, which would increase the relative cost. So I think the pricing won't be ultimately too impacted one way or the other. I don't think it will go down. I don't ever see prices going down, just like I don't see technology ever going backwards. Things tend to increase over time regardless. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm hoping that LSAC does whatever they can to help those for whom taking it at home is not an easy option, especially since if you don't have a working computer, let's say your smartphone is your only device and you can't do it on a smartphone, but you also can't go to the library because you're staying at home, libraries are closed, that presents some unique barriers. And I haven't encountered students who have reached out to LSAC about this, but I'm curious what LSAC will do to help them.
I'm assuming probably find some way to lend out some type of equipment, or if anything, if for whatever reason they can't probably just facilitate the change of date to a later time. I mean, really, I don't see what other options they would have. Either just lend them a computer or a Chromebook or something like that they could use, or just let them change the date until a later time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that out of those two, I would lean more towards them lending out computers. Maybe they have a stockpile of, let's say, 100 Chromebooks or 500 Chromebooks that they will ship to you, let you do it, and then ship back. That seems to me the best option, especially since LSAC does have the funds to do that. The alternative of making people delay seems really quite unfair to me, because who knows how long COVID's going to extend for. And if your LSAT is delayed, that might mean you're applying later in the cycle, which puts you at a relative disadvantage, not only for getting in, but also for scholarship money. And so I think overnighting someone a Chromebook or 2 days shipping them a Chromebook to lend them, I think would probably be the best way to address that.
And they actually do have the tablets anyway, because of all the tablets they had to buy for the digital LSAT. So the resources technically are there for them to be able to lend out those tablets. There we go.
Well, here's the funny thing about that, though. So LSAC just bought what I'm sure are tens of thousands of these tablets, the Microsoft Surface Go's, for the digital LSAT. And the new online LSAT is actually on computer, not tablet. Wow. Isn't that crazy? So the software is the same. Like the look and feel of the LSAT Flex will be the same as the digital LSAT previous on tablet, but the device you take it on will be different. So from what I've read from them, you're actually not doing the online LSAT Flex on a tablet.
Okay, so it has to be on a computer then.
Exactly.
Desktop. Okay, well, I hope they really figure that out by next week, because these are all valid questions that test takers, whether it's in May or in June, this this cycle of law school applicants deserve answers. They deserve to know what's going on. I mean, I don't expect them to have a concrete answer. And I mean, I'm sure they probably don't know as well, but at least an idea of how they're going to combat all these issues that are arising as we go along, rather than leaving students to wonder or leaving them hanging without having any answers.
Correct. I think that they've been thrown for a loop quite a couple times. They've really sped up the adoption of the digital last year, and there were some tech issues, but I think they rolled that out pretty fast once the new LSAC administration came in. And I think I'm seeing a lot of efforts from them to be more communicative and more responsive and more student friendly, which is really nice to see. And they're also acting much more quickly on the new online LSAT than I expected. I would have expected it by June or July at the earliest, and they're rolling this out for May, which is quite impressive. That being said, though, a lot of students were reaching out to them regarding the potential weighting of logical reasoning differently from the other sections. I would have loved to see an answer from them on that during today's webinar. And I don't want people to have to wait till next week to hear on that either, because it changes how you prep. Do you give logical reasoning double time or not? And if the May online LSAT is only a month and a half away, that's not a whole lot of time when you consider the importance of the LSAT and the admissions process and how long students really prep to reach their fullest potential. And so I'm happy to see the changes that are more student focused. I'd love to see even more from them. And I'll keep communicating to students as I learn more along the way over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you're watching this video right now, think about all of those factors when taking the LSAT. If you are going to be taking the LSAT in May because you were registered in March or April, think about if that's something that you want to do, whether that's a good fit for you, or if you want to change your test date for a later time. Definitely contact LSAC and see if that's a possibility for you. Think about how that's going to affect your application cycle, if you would rather wait until these technical glitches get figured out and this pandemic sorts out a little bit more, if you want to wait until the next cycle. So I think right now we kind of have to just keep rolling with the punches, but think about all those things every time something new comes out, so you have a better idea of what your next steps are going to be, rather than feeling overwhelmed, because everything is changing so fast, really on a daily basis.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I guess the biggest thing I would leave students with is, once again, take advantage of this prep time under quarantine, make the most of it. And there's a lot of uncertainty around when you'll take the LSAT, what format it might be in, online versus digital in person. But either way, if you're stuck at home, if you have more free time than usual, make the most of it. Buckle down, get your studying done, because amidst all the uncertainty, you can still take control of your own personal LSAT prep. And the content of the exam has not changed at all. So there is no reason not to get down to it if you can.
Exactly. And there are plenty of resources out there that are free. I know you offer the LSAT Unplugged free LSAT course. Khan Academy has the free one. So there are courses out there. If you think self-studying is a little more difficult on your end, that's to be expected. No one's really, if you're a first timer, second timer, whatever, you're not really an expert at knowing how to do these things. So take advantage of those resources that are out there to help you get the better scores and get the most out of the scholarships. And if you are going to apply this cycle, take advantage and maybe what do you think about scholarship bargaining? Is that a thing? Is that something that people should be taking advantage of right now, that maybe some schools aren't going to be having the enrollment that they foresaw at the beginning of the year?
Well, I'm certainly a fan of negotiating scholarships and doing what's called scholarship reconsideration, where you basically ask them for more money in a very nice and structured way. And what you want to do is obviously get the highest LSAT score possible, because that gives you more bargaining power as a candidate, because if they take you, they could potentially raise their medians if your LSAT and GPA are above their medians. And so that's part of why students are still taking the LSAT even at this late point in the current cycle, because it could help you get off the wait list, and it could help you also have a stronger bargaining position to get more scholarship money. And so my recommendation would be, first, get the numbers, strengthen your application. apply to several schools, at least a dozen or more, so that you have more options and more offers in pocket. So when you go to one school, you could say, this other comparable school offered me more money. And while I'd love to go to your school and your school is my top choice, I've got to consider the finances. If you could increase your offer a bit, that would make it much more possible and reasonable for me to choose your school over another. Another thing you'd want to do is calculate your expected cost of attendance in total, including living costs, because those vary by region. So if you can show that you've done the homework and you can make a reasoned argument around your different options and why one makes more sense than another, you could potentially get more money out of them.
And when you mentioned apply to quite a bit of schools, I just want you guys to know that you are able to email the schools and ask for a fee waiver for the application if they don't already have it. Some schools do have free applications already, but if they don't, feel free to email the schools. A lot of the times they are more than happy to give you a fee waiver for the application. Some schools will even give you a code for the CAS reporting fee. So if you can ask for that, it doesn't hurt to ask, whether they give it to you or not. The best case scenario is that they give it to you, and the worst case is that they don't, and you were already prepared to pay for it anyway. So it doesn't hurt to ask. Take advantage of that. I know that's not something that a lot of people know that they can do, so take advantage of that.
That is great advice. Yes, schools do offer fee waivers. All you got to do is ask. They're getting these requests all the time, so it's certainly not unusual, and it doesn't really cost them very much. And you're also doing them a favor because it increases their selectivity the more students apply. And so the fee waivers are like bonus money for them, but they're also happy in a lot of cases to let you apply for free. And then if you get that offer from them, you could use that as leverage for other schools too. And so apply to more when you can, even if you have to pay for the application. You might be investing hundreds to save tens of thousands in scholarships down the line.
Exactly. So I think overall, it's beneficial for you to have multiple options, because at the end of the day, you also don't know where you're going to get in or who's going to give you what kind of scholarship. So it's better to have options rather than only apply to one or two schools and either only get into one and not get the best scholarship, or get into both and not get a good amount of scholarships. So just have your options open. I think that's the main idea of what we're trying to say, is to have that door open for yourself. Don't shut it out by only applying to a select amount of schools if possible.
Exactly. Well, I think we covered the major points for today, Daisy. Before we sign off, I know you mentioned a few of the resources. I just want to remind students of what I offer. I've got the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast, as well as the Facebook group and the Instagram, along with the LSAT blog. So tons of free resources out there. Please check them out and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all. And I'm sure you'll include those in the description, right?
Yes. So please make sure to check down below. I will have it down there. And if any other questions, I will link all your information down as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Daisy. This was a blast as always.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.